Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. We have somebody who hasn't been with us for a little while, so good to welcome Tracy back.
Hello.
We have someone who hasn't been with us in at least 2 weeks. Welcome back, Mike. And I'm always there, just try not to think about it. So, Shop Talk,
poor
what do
Kevin.
we do? We spend an hour just a little bit of office water cooler style talk, a little bit of talk about data platform topics. If you have questions, drop them in chat. We do talk technical topics. Sometimes we even give you good answers. Depends on how Tracy's feeling that day. So,
You might not get any good answers today.
we'll find out. I mean, chat, press your luck. No whammies. So, our first topic of the night is coming from Microsoft. Here's the link in chat. This is around open sourcing the C# language extension for SQL Server, specifically using .NET 5. So I dropped this in chat mostly to rile up Solomon. This is going to be interesting because it's using the same language extensions platform that we see for R, Python, and Java now in 2019. So now this is including C#. Why I say it's interesting is that there's already CLR support for C# that's gone back to 2005, and the language extension seems a different way to access data. It's still going to work through sp execute external script. So you walk through the extension process, the satellite process, as opposed to having CLR methods baked into the SQL Server instance. And I can see that being a startup cost, just like with R and Python. There could be some performance differences between C# run through the language extension and C# run through the CLR. And I think, to me, this signals that, well, I don't know how much more CLR work is going to happen. We've already seen it was pulled out of Azure Sql Database because there was a way to access I think there was a potential way to access other people's data through CLR in Azure Sql Db because it wasn't designed for a multi-tenant cloud purpose. So they're not pushing it in that direction. We haven't seen that much improvement on premises in a while. And Solomon's response, how it's more marketing than substance. There's a bit of marketing to it. A lot of this is we're opening it up to the community. So now it's up to you. And the question becomes, when would I use this extension versus CLR? And also, I think most interesting was the choice of .NET 5. Given that .NET 6 is in progress, it's in preview still, so I wouldn't necessarily go live with it now, but we're moving to .NET 6 in the world. .NET 5, especially the version that they chose, is a stable release that's only going to be supported for another, I think, 8 months. And after that point, if it's not going to be supported, how easy is it going to be to update the version of .NET for the language extension? It's historically been pretty difficult to update versions of R and Python. In SQL Server 2017, for example, you got a new version of Microsoft R Server, or the R bits for SQL Server, and basically installed it and then had a process to point SQL Server to that new version of the runtime. But with .NET, those updates, I don't think that's a viable method. Frankly, I don't think it's a viable method for R or for Python either, and it seems in 2019 that process I don't think is there anymore. Regarding removing CLR from Azure Sql Db, I believe they were mistaken by that, and it was never really a security flaw. They just didn't thoroughly test it. That is possible, and I did want to make clear that it wasn't a known vulnerability. The story that I had read was that they thought that it could be a vulnerability, and Solomon's information further, it may not even have been a vulnerability. At this point, there are so few people who really understand the inner depths of CLR that I don't know how many of them still work at the company in a position where they would actively look at the CLR code base and really understand the nuances. I mean, you'd have to understand a lot of the nuances of the .NET platform, the .NET framework, as well as the internals of SQL Server. And that intersection is pretty narrow. I believe that's because they added CLR strict security to SQL Server 2017 under the guise of .NET 4 no longer uses CAS as a security boundary, hence even safe assemblies are technically unsafe. Except that was wrong, which is true, it was wrong. Solomon's got a long series talking about this. SQL CLR is grandfathered in and does use CAS, they simply didn't test it. Yeah. Oh, Mike was on mute.
This is a newbie question again. Like Solomon created SQL Sharp, right? Is that Solomon?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. For folks in chat, Solomon is the progenitor of the SQL Sharp CLR assembly set, and probably one of the most knowledgeable people about CLR. There's a very short list of people that I would think would be at least as knowledgeable as Solomon. So we're inflating him in chat.
Yeah, one of the first things I got to do when I joined Channel Advisor was figure out how to upgrade that. Yes.
And BS as to nobody there knows SQL CLR. Anybody can look through the code, ask questions, etc. This is not the first project and the first company to lose initial devs. They have the code. Yes. And I don't want to make it sound like that I'm being defensive of them. Instead, it's more of, this is a huge code base and there's nobody who really does know about it, and there haven't been incentives to dive in. So I understand where you're coming from there, that yes, they have the code, they can learn. They hire people specifically because these are intelligent people who know what they're doing. So I have trust that they could understand this. But you go into a large enough, deep enough code base in a company, and especially if it's in an area where people aren't actively using it and where management isn't actively pushing you in that direction, there are just areas where there be dragons. And I think SQL CLR is one of those places for the SQL Server code base.
So for the learner track people, I did hear on Software Engineering Radio, Scott Henselman was on and gave, to me, as someone who does mostly SQL and pulls data, I don't know all the differences between .NET 5, .NET 6, ASP. So he gave the most clear explanation ever, and I'm just, in my head, I'm thinking they've been trying to move away, like you use .NET to make enterprise applications, and they're trying to make it more lightweight, and they're trying to move .NET 6 to make it smaller and lightweight and more performant, and they're trying to compete with, the speed of some other environments. So anyway, I'll link to it in chat, but it was good for someone like me who doesn't fully know how all these things are utilized.
Yeah, that's been a big part of the .NET team's push, like, for the entire core project, that instead of having the massive framework you have to include in every project, that we have a much narrower tailored set, as well as packages that could be brought in on an as-needed basis. So that philosophical change has driven a lot of their development over the past several years. So no incentives means they haven't been listening. There are many more use cases for SQL CLR than external scripts. Again, I am totally in agreement with you. And I think that CLR has cases where, for example, string splitting, where it is still the fastest way to split strings. There are plenty of cases where if you need something to be done in a high performance fashion, regular expressions, there's no way you're going to get anywhere approaching that. Well, with T-SQL, you just won't get it at all. But this sort of extension functionality, this is the kind of thing that the .NET platform was made for. And frankly, I think a lot of it goes back to the stupid safe versus unsafe naming. And a lot of DBAs who did not know anything about .NET and about application development hear the term unsafe and say, I don't want anything unsafe in my database. And the sentiment is reasonable. You know, if you ask me, do you want this unsafe thing in the place where you make a living protecting the data? The answer, of course, is no. But it's just not understanding the concepts of assembly development and saying, no, unsafe has a very specific meaning in .NET. And just because it has the term unsafe doesn't mean it's going to cause a bunch of damage to your database. But getting that story, getting that message to administrators was immediately an uphill battle because, whoa, it's got the term unsafe. And you have to almost like you educate them and sometimes push back pretty hard before you can even open the door and get them to see, oh, CLR, yeah, this can be useful for stuff. It's just frustrating. They have the basis of a great thing, but rather than fix it up to reach its potential, they abandon it for the new flashy thing. Not the first technology of theirs to meet this fate. Yeah. And also, CLR has been hampered by a long series of missteps. Lack of proper documentation and rollout is a huge part of that. That is another thing. There were relatively few CLR examples. Adam Mechanic had some good examples in a book he wrote around 2005. And it was hard to find a lot of other good examples. You could get the basic, let's write hello world in CLR, but going from there and really getting into how is this different from web development? You know, if I've got a web developer on my staff who knows how to write ASP.NET web forms, we're talking 2005 here. He can write ASP.NET web forms with C# backend, so bring him and write some CLR code. But understanding what high performance data platform code really means and what you can do with it, I agree, there wasn't very much available, and I don't know that there, even to this day, is a lot available showing what you can do with the platform. So Mike, you said you think it was putty. We had a conversation at Duke about where there was one revision is 20 years old. Yeah, PUTTY, that is a Windows application that is for connecting via SSH to machines, and I'm pretty sure the last release for that was something like 2005 or so. But I think it's okay. I don't think they have to change very much.
Yes, the conversation on Solomon's comment about like good software and keeping it, and the conversation was about zero VER, which is a versioning, the zero versioning system. And so anyway, someone was going through all the people who use that. I'll put it in the chat. And someone was like, "Oh my gosh, Putty hasn't had a revision in 20 years."
No, I take it back. I'm looking here. They have had some several revisions over the last few years, but 2017 version 0.7, 2019 0.71, and then 4 months later 0.72. So they've had a few releases, in the past few years. But yeah, that's a remarkably stable application. It does what it needs to do, and that's about it.
Remote desktop manager connection just finally got an update and plugged a security hole. Yes. Just saying.
That's
So can you do some IT
Listen,
support for me?
Microsoft's internals picked it up and it's fixed.
about what it needed to take.
But it might have another security hole for all I know. But the one it had is supposedly fixed, so.
Time to find a new one, folks. And Rednello says, unsafe. My first thought when I heard that, but I use it now. Right. Then, so hearing the term unsafe doesn't mean, oh, I'm never going to think about this. But there was a fraction of database administrators who I think heard that, immediately said nope, and said, I will never have this on my systems. And we're just so recalcitrant that just did not help out at all. Unsafe should have been unrestricted. Yeah, even a more I don't want to say a more true description, because again, in the .NET world, unsafe was, hey, I can call pointers. I can dereference objects. And I can handle memory. So technically, where .NET was concerned, oh, well, that's unsafe. That's the C++ practices, or the C practices with malloc. And with .NET, we'll handle that with our garbage collection. We'll handle that with with these object references as opposed to pointers. And so their terminology made sense in that developer world where they were advocating trying to get people to move to this style of object-oriented development. But then they took that same advocacy-based language, put it in a place where it didn't make sense, and actually ended up having the opposite result. It's a interesting case of semantics. So zero version based versioning. I will have to look at that later. I mean, I do zero based versioning just because I'm lazy.
I do it with my PowerShell because I forget to run the thing that'll automatically do it for me because it's not automatic. I have to manually run the thing that'll automatically update the manifest thing. And then I get too many merge pull thingies in there.
Makes sense. But nonetheless, yeah, I am gonna rag on this for a bit. I also think that it's going to be limited just to it is just to Windows right now. So no Linux support for C# language extensions, and no F# support as far as I'm aware. And that's a case where this is a language that was designed for functions. It's a functional data-centric language. This is a natural fit for your functional data-centric implementations, and nothing. So a little, I would say disappointed, but my expectation is that they're just going to support C#. And also, I wonder if they're going to support .NET Core versions later on so that they can run on Linux as opposed to the framework which requires Windows. It would not have taken much effort to get F# working in SQL CLR. Yeah, I know you and Don Syme were looking at that, I think it was last year. But it seems like it would have involved, I think my recollection was that it would have involved development effort from the SQL Server team directly. That there were limitations. It wouldn't just be something that could easily be patched externally to work to allow language support. Do we have our first cat update?
She's not going to leave me alone, so I might as well just hold her. This is Quake. She's joining the show today.
Although she's too proud to look directly at the camera.
She wasn't going
So-
to leave me alone. Sorry.
Enjoy your cat update. Meanwhile, our beach correspondent, Michael.
Can you see?
Yeah.
So we've confirmed that there is still beach.
For all those people who haven't went to the beach and haven't left. See, that's all we get. Enough to disrupt the show.
Quick saw the beach and said, "Yep, I want to go."
She's been to the beach.
Really?
Yep, we took her there.
I have to wonder how well
She didn't
she
like it.
enjoyed sand in her paws.
She didn't like that part. She didn't like the balcony. Too noisy. But we did
Yeah.
it anyways. She was a good car rider.
Good. That's rare for a cat.
I thought so too. I thought we was gonna have to turn around and find a sitter.
All right, so our second topic, unless cat update technically counts as a second topic, in which case we're on our fourth topic, because we also had beach update.
0.4.
On the fourth, okay.
So, our 11th topic tonight. This one comes from Mala, who couldn't be here tonight. We wanted to have a full cast, but I guess we had a designated survivor. So, from Mala, this is a link to Daniel Hutmacher's post on created and updated timestamps without using triggers. In other words, I've updated a record in a table, and I want to handle a modified time. And you can't always trust that the caller will set a modified time attribute. So instead, historically, one of the more common methods of doing this was to use either an instead of or an after trigger to perform the change. So an instead of trigger, make your change and also add in set modified time equals to get UTC date or sys date time. And the after trigger would be, okay, you can do whatever you want in here, and then afterwards we're going to call another transaction to update those records and set the modified time to now. So those are classic techniques, and they work, but you have those extra transactions that occur. You have the triggers firing. You have a little bit of complexity where I don't necessarily, unless I know that there's a trigger there, I may not think about it. And why does this thing get updated? So Daniel was on the hunt for an alternative and came up with a temporal table. So using a temporal table and having the updated date be a generated timestamp. Normally, the way that we would use temporal tables is that you have the table creation, so you have your main table, and you would have a start date and an end date. And that represents when your record began being valid and when it stopped being valid. So the main table, that end date is always the end of time, December 31st, 9999. And then you have a history table, which stores all of those historical changes. The edits, as well as the time when it became eligible and the time when it stopped being eligible. Well, Daniel creates this table and basically has the valid until timestamp and created and updated. Valid until is that 99991231. You can hide that column. In this case, it's not a useful column for us, so you can hide it and people won't be able to see it. Especially if you do a select star, they won't even see the column. If you don't add a history table or the system versioning equals on clause, you can just use that generated always attribute on your updated time, and that will create it as you need it. So it's kind of interesting. One thing he does point out is that this is UTC as opposed to local time, which frankly, you have a database, store your times in UTC.
UTC,
All right.
yeah. It should be anyways.
Yeah. There's not there really aren't many good cases for arguing to store times locally. It doesn't matter where in the world your machine is, you can always get UTC date. You can always translate UTC date. If you're in a one location, that's fine. Just know how many hours to add or remove. You don't have to worry so much about daylight savings time. You don't have to worry about failover. If I fail over into another region and start adding records 3 hours ago, then I may have conflicts. I may have some sort of issues that come up. If our company merges with another company and we have to bring in data from a different location, again, you'd have less likelihood of conflict. If you have 2 or 3 separate systems, some of them doing it one way, others doing it another way, unless you're very clear on which timestamps are stamped to a particular time zone and which are stamped to the UTC time zone, you're not going to necessarily be able to join those records together most effectively. So, long story short, that didn't even count as a rant. I couldn't quite get riled up enough to make it a rant, but kind of counts more as the more you know session. Use those UTC. There you go.
Yes, UTC time, the best time to use.
Right. That's only because we haven't all standardized on Eastern Standard Time, which is the standard. But strangely, the French and British just won't understand that.
Yeah. That's when all the precons are, so you know.
Well, I mean, it is the standard, except when it's
That's
Eastern
when all the
Daylight Time.
That's when everything like class-wise lines up that way. Virtually, it seems to all be lined up over here. That way, it can cover over there and over here. So.
Yep. So there are 3 counties in Indiana which are the standard for the world. That's what I'm going to go with. Those are the best.
Well, I think before it was it's 5 o'clock somewhere. This phrase was it's UTC everywhere.
I'm sure it sounds better in its original French.
Oui. Got my McGill shirt on.
There you got your McGill University. So check that post out if you are interested in another technique to manage those dates and times and you don't want to create triggers. This is a faster technique. It's still a little slower than it could possibly be if SQL Server had that capability to just automatically set the time for this column. But without that capability, at least you'll have the ability to do it yourself with a temporal table and without having to generate all of that historical data. So kind of an interesting technique, worth pointing out, worth checking out. Performance-wise, there were some comments in there estimating that it's actually quite a bit faster than an equivalent trigger. So if you do live off of triggers, then that's a strategy. Alternatively, if you live off of stored procedure calls, you could have an easier time enforcing setting of modified times that way. Just handle it directly within your procedure calls and then you're fine. But not everybody lives in the world of using stored procedures for all data change.
Can I ask a quick question?
You already did.
So I should know this, but so are those when you do a temp table like he's suggesting in his post, is that per session or is it a global temporary table?
Well, so this is a little different. What you're thinking of is a temporary table or a temp table. This is a temporal or time-based table.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I got you. I remember the versioning chapter on my. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so these are permanent tables, although it would be funny. I don't know if it's possible. I suppose it probably is possible to create a temporal temp table, but let's not go there. Let's not, please don't try to confuse Mike.
Yeah.
Is it possible?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you can create a temp table, why wouldn't you be able to put a temporal on top of it?
There may be some restrictions.
I'm going to find out, yeah. So we can just confuse my.
So yeah, the concept of temporal tables there is really to store historical change data. And you have two tables. You have your current data and you have all of that history. But
Right,
you
what
don't
was-
necessarily want to treat them as two tables. You treat it as query my current table and ask for historical data. What did this data look like as of this point in time?
This date, right? That makes sense.
And the processing underneath will handle that actual execution plan without you having to say union all this table and that table and check for these timestamps, unless you need better performance, in which case you do just that because it ends up being a lot faster, especially if you're interested in joining that data to other tables based off of those timestamps. But neither here nor there. Temporary tables, meanwhile, existing in TempDB and existing for the scope of a session or for all of the sessions which use it, if you're using a regular temp table or a global temp table, respectively, and are more for I need a place to store some data while I work on it. I need a scratch table to work on it.
Right. And that's why I didn't see that language, and I remember it's not in the blue book, it's in the green book. That's the green book was the newer version of the MSC.
Yeah,
I'm not getting
because
right.
the blue book was for, so what Mike is talking about is Itzhak Ben-Gan's books on the certification exam for T-SQL development. The blue books were created for SQL Server 2012, and temporal tables were introduced in SQL Server 2016. So Solomon says, MySQL, I believe, can update columns with default values upon an update. I found out the hard way many years ago when I updated records without disabling that, and the date created column updated with the current values. Ouch. That's when you know they caught you. Or when you mess up a bunch of queries because they were expecting that date created column to be correct. So anyhow, check that out. Next topic. I'm going to try to interrupt Tracy as she's checking out whether a temporal temp table can work.
I'm pretty sure it can.
It could
Why
very
not?
well. I mean, I certainly
Why
not
not?
saying it cannot. I just haven't tried that scenario. And
I mean,
there are
what would
there
be
are
the
some-
purpose? But but why not?
there are some weird combinations of things that you would not necessarily expect to fail, but sometimes can.
You mean create as a global one? Then it might have some sort of purpose until the server restarts. But just in
Maybe.
a session, it wouldn't really have a purpose.
But
Yeah,
maybe not. I mean, I guess I could see if you're doing some data cleanup, for example, and you have a lot of, say, numeric versions of data.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know.
See, I'm getting you to talk about it. It's working.
I don't think that's even a really viable scenario because the whole point of it is time-based, which actually, you got me down this ramp. I'm going down a ramp.
Yeah, my misunderstanding is creating well, what if? Yeah, sorry.
So, temporal tables are not very useful as they are today. There are two very important scenarios for temporal tables, conceptually. Scenario number one, I want to track change history. This is the scenario that actually does pretty well. We have system versioning of dates that are inserted as of the time that this operation changes. This happens. So that scenario is handled pretty well. Scenario two, I want to handle business dates. I want to track business dates of when things were valid. In other words, I have a type 2 slowly changing dimension. Well, the system versioning, those dates don't help you in that regard. You can't set them. You can't control historical data very easily. There's a way you can do it. Essentially, you break the connection between the historical and the current table. You modify your history table manually, and then you reconnect the two together. Well, that's fine until you have a scenario where you want to do this while people are actually using your application. And so if this is a one-time thing that you do to set up, okay, that's fair. But any sort of business logic that, well, the person, their record was updated on August 31st, but they actually terminated with us on the 24th. And we just didn't update the record for a week because we don't need to. But we want the term date to be the 24th. Or if you need to be more exact, the term date was exactly this point in time, but the ETL process didn't happen for another 6 hours because it was an overnight thing. Well, if you're using temporal tables for your type 2 slowly changing dimensions, you lose that capability. You kind of have to go back to, well, I'll store that in a source system and then I'll migrate the details over to a regular table that is shaped like type 2 and has all of the records instead of just current plus subset. But that doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit the need of most cases for temporal data. It only fits the need of, I kind of sort of want an audit, except that I'm not really auditing because it's not controllable. Because some admin can come in and change those values after the fact. But I just want to see this. And in that sense, it works. It doesn't work in the more useful sense. Our Necrosoft says, I am looking for work, and links to LinkedIn. So if you are looking for somebody who does full stack development, who does SQL development, who does occasionally take photos and leave them on the TriPass meetup, go check out the Danish Dynamo on LinkedIn and go give him some money. Or at least a job where he can earn money, which can be used to exchange for goods and services.
US or kroner?
Bitcoin? Just asking. Didn't that become the legal currency of Ecuador or something?
El Salvador.
El Salvador.
So El Salvador historically has been pegged to the US dollar, and they're also looking at pegging to Bitcoin or replacing the US dollar with Bitcoin.
Very good.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't think that's the best currency to peg your currency against, given its volatility. One of the major benefits of pegging your currency is that people don't trust your currency because you have this tendency to inflate it away, and that your government tends not to be very good about monetary policy. And so as an action to get support for creditors, you tie your currency to something else which has a much more stable value. So historically that was gold or silver, and more recently we see pegs to the US dollar. Well, Bitcoin is the exact opposite of that. Their volatility is incredible. I don't know, I guess El Salvador is doing it for the memes, maybe. I don't know.
Gambling. They like gambling. It's not, President's a big gambler.
I've been learning Spanish. It is the Salvador. I just wanted to let you guys know that.
I took 4 years of Spanish. I did not learn that.
Things you'll learn from Shop Talk, hosted by TriPass. Speaking of things you'll learn from Shop Talk, hosted by TriPass, Pass Data Community Summit coming up in November, and their pre-con speakers have been announced. So there's a whole set of people that you might possibly be able to give money to. And Mike is actually pointing at Tracy, but the way that the things are set up, he's technically below. However, if you think about the fact that the Earth is
just go like that.
kind of, yeah, it's an ellipsoid. No matter which way he points, eventually there's a chance that it could get back to Tracy as long as it's not at a direct. Just kind of go at a slight angle, and eventually enough loops around the planet, it'll get there.
Yes.
So.
I am doing a pre-con on Azure Sql Fundamentals, so you can learn about Azure Sql. So we'll be covering Azure Sql Db, Azure Managed Instances, and Azure VMs. Going over, how to deploy them, configure them, the basics of them all, performance, security, maybe some PowerShell. Oh no, I haven't finished writing it yet. We're definitely doing everything except maybe the PowerShell. So depends on how long it gets. Got to make sure I don't do too much. Worst case scenario, I write to PowerShell and you just end up with a whole bunch of extra slides and scripts.
Bonus content.
Or you stay on an extra couple hours. all the money's going to charity too, so there is that.
Oh wow.
So.
Which charity is that?
The Foster Family Alliance of North Carolina. You know me and my heart for foster kids.
True.
I'm only advocating for 10 of them right now. I can do this somehow.
That is actually down from where you were in 2019, isn't it?
Not at the same time.
Okay, I thought you had like 12 or 14 at one point.
No, the highest I've ever been was at 9, and if hopefully the state person doesn't watch this, if they found out I was at 10, they would get my supervisor. Because, well, one case is 7 by itself. 7 siblings, so.
Oh, wow.
But, yeah, that's why it adds up to so much. But, yeah, 10's a lot. They wouldn't. But I already had 2 cases, and they needed someone to take the other one. I was like, you can't have my other 2. They wanted to give them to other people. No,
nope.
Mine. Well, one of them I had spent, like, 2 years of PTO on going to court. Literally.
Wow.
It's mine. So, but back to Azure Fundamentals. Get to learn a lot of stuff. We'll get back to topic. So, but,
right.
It's going to foster kids and helping foster families. The money will be. There's $200 a pop. All the money goes to speakers except for whatever it takes to exchange the money between the UK and here or whatever. There's
grease some wheels, if you know what I mean.
There's some little itty bitty thingy they got to take out, but 100% proceeds going to the speakers. Nothing's being kept by Redgate or Past Data Community or any of that. So, like I said, mine's going to charity, and we'll cover a lot of topics in a lot of ground, and hopefully I won't talk too fast and finish early. I do that a lot. And I get to give a regular talk too, and because I like PowerShell so much, I'm using DBA tools to do HADR. So we'll set up log shipping, database mirroring, and AGs all in an hour, and explain it.
HADR. What's that?
With
acronym?
DBA tools, high availability and disaster recovery. We're gonna do it all in an hour.
In Switzerland.
So, I actually spell it out in the title, but it's just like.
Do you use PowerShell? Do you use Visual Studio? Do you use Visual Studio?
I use VS Code to write my PowerShell. So.
You got to take your course. I'll get to see.
You have to see, yeah. If I get to that part. That is November 9th, I believe, is the day I'm giving it. The Tuesday of the summit.
Yes.
So it'll be at 9 a.m. I got to pick my time. I don't know why I get to pick, but I did. 9 a.m. I was told was a good time to help out the West Coast and help out the Europeans. And unfortunately, you can't help out the whole world. I tried to figure out a way to do that on Twitter, and everybody kind of laughed at me almost. Or told me I'd have to present twice like Rob Sql did once. And I'm not Rob.
No, that's a lot of effort to put in. I mean, one pre-con presentation is plenty enough.
And this is my first one I've ever done. So I'm completely terrified. So.
Yeah, it'll be fine. You'll be done in 2.5 hours.
That's what I'm afraid of. The speed.
So, It'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Fine.
Um,
I got this. I got this. If I can make the other presentation, I can focus more on this one, get my demos all set up, spin me up a managed instance a couple of days ahead of time, so they take like 6 hours to get spun up, just so I can show people one and do some stuff with it. Not much, because it's just like a regular SQL Server for the most part, but
Right.
not.
Are you going to talk at all about elastic pools or hyperscale or serverless?
Yes.
So
I already made slide decks for all that.
that'll soak up plenty of time as well.
That's already got slide decks in there, so yes. There's a lot of I'm covering everything I can find to cover, and then I'll probably be taking stuff out. Then I'll probably have hidden slides and stuff to go back to if we need time. And I have no idea where to put the breaks in at. Like the first break they told me to put in after 2 hours. I was like, I don't know if I can talk for 2 hours straight.
Yeah, if we're talking about pre-con logistics, this is what you signed up for, chat. Pre-con logistics.
I was thinking every
day.
hour and a half, because it's a 7. Technically, that it's from 9 to 5, so that's 8 hours. And you get an hour for lunch, so every hour and a half or so, get a break.
That can work. Normally, if you say 8 hours of training minus 1 hour for lunch, all right, so you've got 7 hours of training. Usually, I will have about 1 hour of that be breaks. I tend to take frequent breaks, roughly every hour, but that the breaks are only about 5 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes. So trying to keep you on pace, but also give people the opportunity to step out if they need to. And also give it the feel of, okay, this is about as much information as you're going to get in a session. Now let's take a break and decompress. Take 10 minutes. Okay, we're going to get back to it and do it again. Even if it's about a 6-hour training day, I still ideally want to try to take 1 hour. Sometimes you're constrained in that they'll tell you, nope, here are the break times that we will have, and you'll just work around them. All right, I'll work with that. But normally you have enough freedom to set those times, and if you set a break time, especially for an online training, if you set the break time more than about 10 minutes, the problem is a lot of people will get distracted and might not be able to make it back for a while because, oh, well, you've got all this time. Can you help me on this work problem? And instead of being in training mode where they're active and engaged, just kind of wandering off. If you do it in person and you have a break longer than about 10 minutes, basically make the break long enough that people can go use the restroom, grab something to drink, and come back. Go much further than that, and you start losing people because, oh, I now have this 20-minute break. It's not long enough to go do anything, but it's too long to just sit here.
Yeah. But they had 15-minute break recommendations in there, so. And then they had time. They had a time schedule that they recommended. I asked for a recommendation on it because I'd never done one.
Right.
But they didn't say I had to stick to it. So
the biggest training I've done is Epic, where I went to Wisconsin for the EHR training, and they would use Zoom it, and they would put a timer on the board, and it would just count down 7 minutes or 11 or whatever you guys. I think that worked pretty well because everybody.
Yeah,
I stand up, take a phone call, and I'm looking at your screen and set it like 6 more minutes.
Yeah, I have a website that I've already found to put a countdown timer on. So, I'm going to share that on the screen when we get to a break, and it'll count down to how many ever minutes it is, or end of lunch break.
Yep. Of course, you can also do that with OBS Studio.
But I have to use whatever thingy they're in. Whatever the conference software they're in.
They're probably hosting in Zoom, but you can.
But it's Zoom-like, but it's inside of something.
Yeah.
The Matrix?
It's like Zoom or GoToWebinar, or it's like webcasting. Is the two different options I was given. but it's inside of a piece of software.
It's all streamed through a virtual camera, and unless you're dealing with, well, there are a couple of pieces of software that do not like OBS virtual cameras, and I think GoToWebinar is actually one of them. But Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, all that stuff is just fine with using a virtual camera through OBS Studio.
Yeah, hopefully they'll give us access to it early for us people who haven't done this before. I think everybody else on there has done it before, so. I'm
sure you'll have an opportunity, especially if you ask. For other people, it's like, just roll in, whatever, we'll deal with it.
Some could be like, my hair's on fire. My hair will be orange and green then. So it won't be really on, the orange part will be on fire, so.
Going all out for PASS
I'm
Data
just doing
Community
it
Summit
this week, orange and green. I just wanted orange and green. Is that their color?
Those are the colors this year, yeah.
Oh man, I look like I'm gonna match. I just wanted orange and green. I thought you were for a particular reason.
Like this is how Tracy got the pre-con, because she was willing to go that extra mile.
Well, now it's a good excuse. I'd be like, look, I'm dedicated.
Yep. So actually, the logo is the whole Roy G. Biv, but orange and green are the ones that are most obvious.
I'm dedicated. I'm sending a picture to the person who asked me to do the pre-con afterwards. Person who got me in this mess.
That'll work. So my 10-minute thing, that is fairly uncommon. Usually with pre-cons or with trainings, you'll usually see 15-minute breaks. I tend to like them a little shorter and a little more frequent, but that is a personal preference versus this is the right way to do it.
Although you just told me to do it that way, and then you just told me don't do it that way.
No, I'm telling you I would recommend doing it that way, but I'm also telling you that is opinion as opposed to laying down scientific research on pregnant rats and finding out how long they can stand before they need to take a break, and whether that break should be 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and then saying that this now applies to humans.
You got to select from the temporal table when Kevin said this thing.
First that thing. And then we know when he changed his mind.
Never show that to my wife.
Check it out. There's other pre-cons the day before, so you can do something else on Monday, mine on Tuesday, and then you can do the other 3 days for free.
Which is amazing. I mean, it's a lot of value for someone like me, and that they're being open about having learners, because it's pretty much an advanced database group, generally speaking. It's pretty cool that they're doing a career focus and a newbie track, and that they're making it available for free, because I mean, it's an expensive one.
Yeah.
Historically,
they did the
it's been very expensive.
Track, yeah. So it'll be fun, I think. You know, we get to do all the hanging out and all that stuff afterwards. Hopefully they'll have social stuff we can do without getting too burnt out being on our computers. I was really tired last year. Well, I did the whole volunteering throughout all the different thingies at night. So I was exhausted. I was in rooms and trying to keep them chatting and stuff.
Yep. I'm a hard pass on all that stuff. Solomon says that I'm saying don't not do it that way. Sometimes, always, but perhaps definitely.
I got to screenshotting that.
Well, I'll have to see. Like I said, it would depend on how the slide deck lays out too. If I literally can make it line up to the right number of presentations that way, it would work out better that way.
Yeah. What I'm really saying is, here is my opinion. I believe that it is correct. However, I could be wrong. A lot of other people don't do that.
If I have 6 presentations, then I have 6 breaks that are 10 minutes. That's the whole day.
Right.
I just have to divide it up into 6 and try to. That actually makes sense to me. It helps me out in trying to divide the slides in my head.
Yeah, that's
Because
the
I was not dividing it their way very well, the way they gave me. Because it's like the first part was 2 hours. I was like, people are not going to listen to me for 2 hours.
no, 2 hours
way.
is too long.
And then after that, it was like an hour and 15 minutes or hour and a half. It's like they might do that, but still, that's a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a
I'm-
recommendation. It wasn't a requirement, just a recommendation. I think that they
Right.
got that format from somebody or the other. I don't know. Or that's
Yeah.
how they done it in the past.
I'm kind of growing to like the short sessions, the 40-45 minute session lengths. It's from the standpoint of a speaker, it's really difficult because it can take you 20 to 30 minutes just to get into the really interesting stuff. I need to give you the grounding, the foundation before I can get you to this. And so you've essentially cut off, back in the day when we had 75-minute sessions, you've cut off a good half hour of my time with that, of the good stuff. But from the standpoint of sitting in the audience, it is difficult to stay focused on a presentation for more than 30 to 40 minutes. 45 is probably starting to push it. And once you get to 55, 60 minutes, there are just too many distractions that even if you're interested, even if you want to be engaged, are going to pull you away.
You gotta be showing me something good by then.
Pretty much. And the problem is in the middle that once you get past that about 20, 25 minutes,
That's where
and
you lose people.
yeah, that's where, and it's not out of rudeness. It's not that they don't want to pay attention, but that's when the phone starts coming out. And I've already checked out of this, been more than 45 minutes. Solomon,
Yeah, like I said, people are going to do that during the pre-con. I know they're just going to go around. Hopefully, they're going to do what they did last year and record them and have it available so many days afterwards for people that, have to bail because of work or miss part of it or something.
hopefully, unlike last year, it won't be in a publicly accessible blob storage account.
Don't tell the secrets. And unlike last year, I won't be moderating one, I don't think. Because I do not think I will volunteer to moderate one the day before I have to give one unless I am insane. But I might be insane.
Even if you are, don't do that. You'll want that extra day.
But do I want to take one is my other problem. Because I do want to take one. But do I want my mind melted by taking one and then have to give one the next day?
That is a little easier to pull off. But moderating means you have to be active. If you're...
I know. Trust me, I remember.
Yeah, if you're just attending, especially if there's a recording afterward, you can phase in and out like Solomon does in chat. He phases in when we call out his name. That's why I mention his name every few minutes so that he stays engaged.
That's a good
technique. We got to
technique.
keep his attention. He's got a short attention span of about 5 seconds.
Well,
I've been doing the Pomodoro method. I've been trying to do that. I like 25 minutes is good. I like that. And then take a couple minute break.
I take a break every hour for like 10 minutes and get up and move around at my home. I got a thing that goes off on my phone because, sitting hurts my shoulder that still hurt. And it's almost healed, so I don't want to sit too much and mess it up. And then I stand till the next time it goes off. And I can move around again. So, but yeah, $200. Charity, remember, charity, foster kids, foster families, important.
Well, I'm excited to take it because we're
directly
getting into Azure VMs now in my new role, so it'd be really good for me to take it.
Yeah, and if you take the Azure VM part, my Azure VM part's being verified by an expert.
Well,
not me, just another.
It was funny because on one night we had a president said that 50% of the tickets are because the VMs are sized incorrectly. And sure enough, that's what we did. Like we were having a scrum, and I was like, I don't have enough RAM to do this thing, and it was like, oh, probably because our VM was too small.
Yeah.
Boom.
Because I'm going to have a couple people read through my slides because, I misspell stuff all the time. I'm just bad at that. And make sure things make sense. So I'm going to have a few reviewers, including one that knows VMs really well.
Awesome.
Good to have.
Yeah. So then I just got to find some SQL Azure people as well.
I just focus in areas where nobody else knows anything about it, and so
Polybase
it catches on.
F#.
Speaking of which,
No, F# was taken off. It's taken off. I heard a whole program about it the other day. It was awesome.
F#, Gestalt psychology, IoT. There's that whole big data analytics thing. You can say whatever you want. Nobody can prove you wrong. On that note, we've reached the top of the hour. So, you've spent another glorious hour with Chop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. A quick reminder that we have a meeting tomorrow. Our advanced DBA meeting is coming up. If you have not already registered, meetup.com/tripass. And Bob Pusateri is going to talk to us about data compression. Then, week after that, main meeting, Kathy Kellenberger, Modern T-SQL for Better Performance. We'll have another episode of Shop Talk after that, followed by Hope.
Foley.
Hope Foley, yes. Sorry, Hope, I blanked on the last name.
Shh, don't tell her. She's not
So,
watching.
Hope Foley will be talking to us about Azure Synapse Analytics, and that will be for our Business Intelligence and Data Science meeting. So we've got a packed schedule for the month of September. We hope to see you at least one of those meetings. But regardless, take care. We'll see you later.
Thank you. Good night.